My friends and I make jokes all the time about how when you pay your taxes, you should probably have a itemized receipt of like what you're paying for. But realistically, that is a big issue. Like we have our state budget and then, we say it's going to these places, but where is it actually going?
Welcome back to the Around the District podcast. I'm Gabrielle Mazar.
I'm Nicole Brown.
And on today's episode, we have Claudia Kline. She's running for the House of Representatives for LD8, and she is the next generation of leadership. Welcome to the show today.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
So, Claudia, you threw your name in the hat to run for the House of Representatives in Legislative District 8, correct?
Yes.
How? Why?
Yes.
Do tell.
Yes.
What made you want to do that?
So I would say pretty early on in my life, I kind of felt that I was going to end up in a position of leadership at some point, whether that was school board, city council, House of Representatives. But for me, I just actually became old enough to run for House of Reps. So that was a big part of it. I could have ran last year or last cycle, but I didn't feel really prepared. And despite running campaigns for other elected officials, I just didn't feel like I myself was ready to talk about certain policies. I'd ran on a lot of election protection, environmental, and education messaging for other candidates. And so I had to learn a little bit more about where I stood on those things. But for me, the House of Representatives stood out because I've had the privilege of living all over the state. I've lived in Cottonwood, Prescott, Douglas, Phoenix, South Phoenix, just everywhere. And so, but for me, LD8 is where my husband was born and raised, and I know his family has lived there for a really long time. And also just as an environmental justice organizer, there was a representative who was sitting in the seat and not making really good decisions. For somebody so young to want to see 35, I just knew that her votes were just not going to cut it. So I finally was just like, ready or not, I can't sit this out.
Just do it.
We've been seeing a lot of younger candidates this time around. What do you feel about that? How does that energize you in this election cycle, knowing that so many young adults are running for election this time?
Yes. So I actually just finished my term as president of the Young Democrats of Arizona. So I was able to meet with a lot of the young candidates. We saw, I think the first big one was Deja Fox, right? And her race, and a lot of people criticized her because of policy and all that jazz. But honestly, as a young candidate, it's really hard to have the proper vocabulary and learning how to talk about those things. Also, Congress is like completely different than like more local. But for me, I'm super thankful that we have, I think, 6 Gen Z specific candidates running for the state ledge that made it onto the ballot. And I mean, we've seen time and time again, people who are like in their 60s, 70s, retirement age. And that's, they're looking at it as a community service thing, which people are dying. And like, we need to be making these decisions with our experiences, not because like, oh, you thought it would be fun to do something. And that is the narrative that I've heard some of the people approach this position with. And so it's kind of frustrating knowing that, like, for me, my youngest sister is 6 years old and she's really struggling with the education system. And all of my family has respiratory issues because of the air quality in Arizona. And people just aren't addressing those types of things based on their lived experiences. And a lot of the people who are younger have been born and raised in this state or their district. And so that's super important to get those lived experiences to the Capitol, because I know from my experiences going to the Capitol, a lot of people aren't even from Arizona. They kind of just came from wherever and just
me.
No offense, but like,
I'm not from Arizona.
they just kind of like come and they're like, yeah, so I saw this one thing that was kind of bad. So now I'm here. And you're like, oh, okay, but there's a lot of things that we could work on and fix. And having those lived experiences of being in the state for so long, you kind of have seen what's worked and what hasn't. And I mean, my district is the average voters in their 60s. So a lot of people are like, and in the 80s, we went through this and now it's happening again. And I'm like, yes. And why aren't people learning from their mistakes?
Right.
What's the minimum age to run for?
25.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about the environmental issues just for a second.
Okay.
Dust storms.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people get Oh, what is the one where you can't be out in the dust storms, or you can?
Valley fever.
Oh, valley
Yes,
fever. Yeah.
valley fever. So is that what you were talking about when you were saying your family, a lot of your family has respiratory issues, or is it just like asthma because of the environment and what's in the air? Like, can you talk
Yes.
about that a little
A
bit?
lot of us have asthma. Some people have breathing issues that are really bad. Like one of my cousins, he's barely going to be 16 and he has to go on like a breathing machine at least once a week because of the air quality. It's just so poor. And I also think I was born in Cottonwood, Arizona. And so there's like a mine out there, there's a concrete factory. And so I think some of that stuff too trickles into the water and like affects our bloodstreams and stuff like that. So I think when my mom was living out there, it kind of ended up affecting all of us in that way.
I was going to say, are more areas
Yeah.
impacted than others in Arizona?
Yeah, definitely.
Just based on your experience.
And the thing is, in that area, there's a big Native community. So that's also the impacts that people are facing. And so for me, I have family that live on the Yavapai-Apache reservation still to this day. And, they're being affected by the environmental impacts, the access to even vote, democracy. One of my cousins used to do voter registration out there. And this last election cycle, there was no work for her to do that. And so there's a lot of things impacting those.
I was going to say, like, in this state, it's like the Native American community, the African American community, the two at the bottom, with as far as, voting and most impacted negatively by policies that aren't for everybody. I'm just trying to be nice about how I say that. But, and so are you Native American? I know that. Okay.
Yes.
So when you say that, did you ever live on the reservation at all?
No, we lived like right outside of it.
I should have asked you your background first.
Yeah.
Which I didn't. So if
okay.
you want to explain or expand upon that, you're more than welcome to. Because I didn't ask you your background first, which we don't do.
It's okay. I have some background, or part of my background is Pascua Yaqui. I have family too that also is Yavapai-Apache. And then on my other side of the family, we are a variety of Latino backgrounds, because we have Guatemalan, Mexican, stuff like that. So,
well, the reason I bring it up even is because representation matters, right? So when you think about in the House of Representatives statewide, how many people represent your community or mine? I know 2.
Right.
Mine. I don't know about yours.
I think there's 3 right now for Native, but
Yeah. So that's why it matters. Is that another reason why you're running? Because I'm assuming that.
Yeah, and I'm super thankful to have part of the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community on my part of my district, and that was actually the second neighborhood that we'd canvassed, because the reservation and the Mesa portion typically get ignored and tend to vote more red because of that. And actually, surprisingly enough, a lot of the people that were on my list to knock were under the age of 35 on the reservation, and they were all like, "Wow, that's really ballsy of you to be out here and do the things." And it was also really funny because I guess like, I mean, obviously I'm not from that specific community, so they were always like, watch out for the dogs, watch out for this. And I'm like, I'm going to take these dogs home. Like, don't even worry about that. Made a lot of friends that day. There was a lot of dogs, but yeah.
What are you hearing around LD8 from the constituents? What are you hearing about what their concerns are? Like what's most concerning to them right now today? Because there's a lot happening.
Yes.
So what do you think is most concerning?
I would say it's a tie between healthcare and access to healthcare, whether you're a student or a retiree. That's a really big issue. People don't have health insurance. People don't have time off of work to go to a clinic or a doctor. A lot of, hospitals I know the hospital I was born at is now being closed down, even though that's not in my district, but those are things that are happening all across the state. And then the second one would be checks and balances in terms of like our elected officials right at the executive level, but also ICE is a big thing. I know when I went to canvass in Mesa, nobody cared about anything else. They were just like, how do you feel about ICE? And I was like, yeah, we don't like ICE around here. But and then that was kind of like even the ESA vouchers, I would say, was like another big one, and how that's impacting our public education.
Do you have young children?
I don't have children, but I am the oldest of 8, and my youngest sister is 6. So and my parents actually had me very young. My mom was 14 when she'd gotten pregnant with me, and so my two of my younger sisters, they do like call me mom and stuff like that. And I do try to show up for them when I can, like the field trips and the parent teacher conferences and stuff like that. So I always tell myself that I'm doing this all for them. Actually, when I turned in my signatures, I took them with me and they were like, I don't know what this means, but this is so fun. This building is so cool.
How old are they?
6 and 8.
So you took the
little
youngest,
ones.
the
Yeah.
two little ones.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow, that's it. That's really interesting. And good, you're starting them young. That's
Definitely have to.
important.
Yeah, I take them. I do a lot of protests or rallies and stuff, and so I try to keep them in that space because my grandmother was very much like that when I was growing up, and my mom is a single parent, so she doesn't really have time to participate in those types of things. So when I can, I try to bring them in.
And so ESA vouchers would be very important to your family because it impacts your younger siblings.
Yes, actually, the
Directly.
district that they live in is LD11, and there's really only like one, maybe two public schools out there that they have to go to charter schools because that's kind of just where they are. Like the elementary school in the district, I think, is like a D school. So my mom just chose to put them in charter schools instead.
Wow.
It's interesting that you're hearing a lot about from the constituents about healthcare. And ICE, because I was reading this morning about how many people are being kicked off, or not kicked off, but dropping and no longer paying for healthcare, and how many people are affected by ICE, because it is a lot. And they're trying to twist the narrative into, oh, fraud. These people were fraudulent, but 4.5 million people is not fraudulent.
Yeah.
Like, people can't afford. I mean, I know my healthcare alone almost tripled. So like I can afford to pay it. And, I had to weigh my options. Do I keep healthcare or do I just keep this money and just pay out of pocket? But there's a lot of people that can't do that. And so we're seeing people not paying for healthcare, and especially in, the Native American communities, like that's a big deal. And like, it's kind of insane that they're trying to sell this whole narrative of fraudulent people on healthcare. And we know, especially with Arpaio and everything that happened here, how many years ago when they were just going
She
into
was probably really
businesses.
young with
Yeah,
Arpaio.
well,
I
we
was
know.
like,
We know.
I was like,
We know.
she was
They
probably a kid.
they were just going into businesses and arresting people just based on the color of their skin.
And they're still doing that.
And they're still doing
that is still happening.
right. And
But-
now it's just, I think, more publicized and I guess highlighted, and it's all over
Yeah.
the United States through it. So it's becoming just a bigger issue. And I think it's, it's interesting that now people are really like upset about it, and that you're having these conversations with people in your district.
And now people have to choose between healthcare, gas, food, because gas prices are at $5 for what I just filled my car up the other day for premium gas is over $5.
Mhm.
So now there's a choice between healthcare, there's a choice between food, gas. Like, do you go anywhere because you have to put gas in your car?
Yeah.
Those are all issues that are very relevant to our community here in Arizona. So my question to you would be, what do you want to change? What would you like to change if you are elected and make it past the primary and you are elected? What do you want to change to make things better?
I think that there's a lot in terms of, I want to say, making the corporations pay like their fair share of things, and like getting certain like insurance companies, right? I had gone to the ER and they tried to charge me 10 grand for my visit. And then it wasn't until I'd like pushed and pushed and pushed that they were like, okay, 700. And I'm like, where are you even getting this starting number
You
from?
negotiated it
Yeah.
out.
And it's good that you pushed, because they say that most people don't.
Yeah.
Most people don't do that. I think it's somewhere around 2% of people actually fight the insurance companies because of that. They just give up, and then a lot of them just don't pay it, or they do pay it and they don't fight the insurance companies. They just accept it and move on.
And that's like a big factor, right? And I know for me and my family growing up, they were just kind of always like, yeah, we're not going to pay it. And I'm like, well, but then like buying a home and doing the things, and like, which now like I can't even think of a single person in my family who owns a home now that I'm sitting here. But so that's like a big thing, is like holding certain corporations accountable and giving them like caps. I would say too, like data centers is a big thing right now and making sure they're paying their fair share because then that comes on to us. I was actually surprised you didn't say utilities in that as well because I paid.
Try not to be biased.
Okay. Well, I just paid $500 for my utility bill in January. I never turned the heater on. I never turned the AC on. And I live in an apartment. Like, why was that so expensive? It was a bill I was not ready to pay at all. I was expecting it to maybe be like 170. So when that came, I was like, okay, we're gonna not go grocery shopping this month. And like, that's just kind of where we're at. Because it ended up being 90 degrees in February.
The
So
environmental issues are impacting us all the way around.
yeah. And
90 in February. Wait, no, it was 100 and what, 4 or something in March?
yeah.
In March
Yeah.
in Arizona. We don't see that.
I only
Until, like,
remember February because I ended up getting sunburnt from canvassing that day.
Yeah, in February and March were higher or warmer than what they should have been, which impacts utilities.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, you weren't prepared because why would you be? It's not the summer
Yeah.
where we normally see those rates, right? Or those high bills. And again, you're right. I should just be fair across the board and say food, utilities, right?
Yes.
Gas prices, healthcare, like those are all basically it's a big old thing of affordability.
Yeah.
You know, how do we afford to live? What is the economy doing where we can afford to live like we expect to live? You know, like we shouldn't be struggling this hard as American citizens in any of the states to have to decide between living, eating, driving. I mean, it's just crazy to me right now.
Yeah.
Yes. I think we also need to be way better at logging our expenses. Like my friends and I make jokes all the time about how when you pay your taxes, you should probably have a itemized receipt of like what you're paying for. But realistically, that is a big issue. Is like we have our state budget and then, we say it's going to these places, but where is it actually going? My master's capstone was following the money because growing up, we had to navigate a lot of these systems like Title 8 housing and like, food stamps and healthcare and all these things. And a lot of my friends in my teens were getting apartments for the first time. And then they would be facing eviction charges and then the city would be like, go here. And then that never actually was a resource that existed. So people are navigating these spaces where they're being told that there's resources that exist, but they don't. So then what is all that money that we allocated actually going to? So that's like a big thing
that's a segue into what's happening right now with the budget in Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
And they did not vote on a budget. Well, actually they did.
Yeah.
Down party lines.
Right.
And then the governor vetoed the bill that they put on her desk. And they have to do this by July. They have to fund the state by July.
Yeah.
So how would you reach across I know I cut you off, but
no, it's okay.
How would you reach across the aisle to the other side and try to, because one thing I'm learning is the younger Dems like you, sometimes they don't see them as, you don't have enough lived experience to be doing this job, right?
Yeah.
Some people see it that way. How would you, because you're like the third young Dem that we have interviewed on this podcast. No, 4, because we did 4.
Yeah.
And want to know from all of you, how are you going to reach across the aisle and get the other side to see your point of view, or what would be your tactic to do that?
So realistically, that is hard, I think, because of the fact that a lot of the Republican candidates or elected officials don't actually even show up to their communities to hear what they need. And living in Prescott and living in Cottonwood, I know, well, that's LD1, but still, like, I know that like people aren't experiencing that. But I do know from people that I've spoken with in, the Yavapai-Apache reservation, or even the Republicans who live in my district, is that ultimately we are still facing the same things. The affordability crisis, healthcare is a big one. And, everything else is kind of like split. But I do think if you can find time to like hear people out, even if I don't agree with people, I feel like I try to sit with them and hear their story of like, what really does matter to you? Like, what are you here for? The money? Like, are you here for, that we hear that all the time, right? That they're just bailing out the billionaires. They don't actually care about their constituents. But I think I've not been aware of like people actually having more interpersonal conversations. It's more about like representing your district. These are things that your district need. But I've been reading some of the websites of some of the candidates and listening to the policy, especially for the ACC coming up here. And there's they're using that same language. So then it's like, well, you ran on this. So is this just a campaign promise, or like you actually trying to do that? So that's also something that I've been sitting with, and we don't know who's going to win. So I can't give you a definitive answer right now because I don't know the people that are going to end up in the House next year. But I'm always willing to hear people out. I actually, while was president of the Young Dems of Arizona, was part of a national nonpartisan coalition. And we, again, agreed that there are 3 issues that we all care about as young people. And how can we move that forward and make sure that those are things that are getting done for us to look forward to a future that like we can not just skate by like we're doing right now, but like actually have families and build a home.
Yeah. And ultimately people just really want to be heard, and they want to know that you're listening to them, and want to know that, you know, you're doing the best that you can for them, whether it is one side or another. And that really is what it is. But so we're here with Claudia Kline. She's running for House of Representatives for LD8. We are going to come back for another episode with her. So this is Around the Districts podcast. You can like, follow, share, and leave a comment if you have any questions. I'm Gabrielle Mazar.
I'm Nicole Brown.
And we will see you in the next episode.